Hugo is a 2011 film from
Martin Scorsese.
Oh, okay, what was that? Just every time I say
Martin Scorsese.
Okay, yeah, whoa. Every time. Anyway, He Who Must Not Be Named made a film in 2011 called Hugo. And as things are wont to turn out, the moment I mentioned this on Twitter, I began to get messages from people that said they did not enjoy this movie. But like, more than usual, I mean, I did an episode on Sunshine, which is one of the most polarizing movies I've ever touched, but this actually eclipsed that. Didn't really expect the same thing with a children's movie directed by one of the best American filmmakers of all time, but here we are. Maybe I can change your mind by attacking this film from an angle you're not really expecting: the visuals. This opening tracking shot required a year and 1,000 computers to render. Actually, the whole film is kind of a never-ending parade of awesome tracking shots. It's meant to capture the imagination of a child, like when we're in Hugo's perspective, the camera has more life to it. The simplest way to approach this movie is to start literally at the birth of cinema. Hugo is in every sense a celebration of the father of film special effects, Georges Méliès. Actually, more correctly, he's the father of all of it. You see, when the Lumiere brothers invented the film camera, they didn't see much of a future there, but Méliès did. In fact, he is the most deserving of credit in creating that future. Film started as just a silly carnival trick, but Méliès, a magician at the time, mind you, knew the value of the filmed image as part of his act. But the Lumiere brothers wouldn't even sell him a camera, so he built his own. Méliès level? People came from miles around to see his creation. When Arrival of a Train came out in 1896, people were like,
"Hold the phone! How is this real? What satanic tomfoolery is this? I mean, what the are these ghosts? Is this a train of ghosts? What the man?"
This guy invented everything we take for granted today. The crossfade, the stop edit, the double exposure. You know, every editing trick my show uses. Oh, okay. So how do you take that impossibly relevant history and convert it into the energy of a modern motion picture? Well, as it turns out, Martin Scorsese chews through limitation like a lemur in a Twizzler factory because he shot this entire film in the modern equivalent of black and white, the same limitations as Méliès at the time. But what is the modern equivalent of black and white? Well, the Michael Bay apocalypse, the opiate of the masses, the color book of the gods.
Teal and orange.
Scorsese had his production designers keep the entire palette of the film in teals and oranges. Every costume, every set, everything. Seriously, every goddamn thing. It pops so hard off the screen, it's easy to see why this film was nominated for 11 Academy Awards that year, winning for Best Cinematography and Best Visual Effects. But that year it lost Best Picture to, drum roll, The Artist? It was Scorsese's first film to be shot in 3D, and my god, if you're still capable of seeing in stereoscopic 3D, this is the film to do it with. This film is beautiful in a way that I don't think comes off as anything but a celebration of film as a medium. Sure, there's no shortage of CGI, but you can see the craft and meticulous care that went into every frame of this thing. Every frame is so dense. But I think there's actually a mindset that is super helpful to be in when you view this movie. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who grew up watching Méliès films, because that's the world that the characters inhabit. They wouldn't recognize CGI or anything of the sort. They just stare up and slack-jawed wonder and be like,
"Hang up the phone! How is this real? This is like reality, but on some bomb-ass opiates, yo! Like, what the is this? Was Satan mad when he stole his soul and shoved it inside of your film projector?"
And this film is made for them. Another important filmmaker to the overall visual story of this movie is American tycoon and international cinematic buffoon man, Harold Lloyd. One of the most important things that Keaton and Lloyd brought to the silent cinema was not cutting to a dialogue card. He believed that the story should read to an audience without having to explain it with text and cut away from the action. This movie illustrates this point by having the kids sneak into a showing of, "Oh, no big deal, just Harold Lloyd's safety last," and they react in ways that accentuate the action happening on screen without speaking. And Lloyd's contribution is just as important to cinema as a whole as Méliès' contributions. There are numerous scenes in the film, usually involving Sacha Baron Cohen's station inspector, where there is no dialogue at all, just action, no cutaways. Want to go a step further? You can watch this film in black and white with no sound, supply your own soundtrack, hit it, and the film still works perfectly. All actions of characters and plot of narrative can be inferred without the use of characters explaining it to us. Sure, you lose the nuance a little bit, but this movie is somehow even more goddamn beautiful. Every movement purposeful, every action exaggerated, every space larger than life. But when you bring the sound back, you get another titan of cinema's contribution to the medium. nuance. While the action scenes are grandiose, bombastic, and larger than life, the quieter scenes in the film exploring the characters are reserved, quietly dramatic, and beautiful. But which filmmaker brought big action set pieces to quiet artistic dramas changing the landscape of cinema forever?
Please, listen to me. You don't understand. You have to let me go. I don't understand why my father died.
For you guessed it,
Martin Scorsese.
still doing that. Okay, this film is a cross-section of those two disparate filmmaking styles combined into one beautiful new thing. Just take the scene where they turn on the automaton for the first time. It's both exhilarating and terrifying and weird. And how the hell is Martin Scorsese getting such great performances out of his child actors? Hey, that's Méliès's movie, A Trip to the Moon. Wait, George Méliès is actually in this movie and they need to find him? Wait, the Golden Fleece in this movie is George Méliès? That's fucking awesome.
But did you know?
Part of the reason Méliès retired and died, penniless and embarrassed, was because this film, his masterpiece, A Trip to the Moon, needed to make money internationally to stay afloat. Upon the Edison Company receiving a print of the film, they just distributed it. They stole it and made a shitload of money off pirating the movie. And that's no small thing. Film piracy literally bankrupted the first true genius of cinema. I don't even have a joke here, that just sucks.
Edison, you flailing bag of dicks!
This film even uses the clarity of its digital format to such a degree that they make the everyday mundane things absolutely blast off the screen. Dust is always shown, floating through the frame, blistering to life, dancing across the screen, something never believed possible with the cameras at the time. The film explores the wonder of filmmaking through a child's eyes because that's who Martin Scorsese has been all his life. The scene where we follow René Tabbert around as a young boy on a Méliès set might as well say, "Hello from the other side!" across the top in bright flashing letters. And yes, I know this film actually began because Scorsese's daughter suggested the book this film was based on to him, but when I think about who this film was actually made for, it feels like the answer is a young Martin Scorsese. He made this film for a younger version of himself. And that's what makes this film so much more interesting and important to me, seeing it as something so deeply personal to one of our best directors, because the reality is this film is really about Ben Kingsley, who seems like a cranky old coot, but is actually George Méliès in disguise. And we're actually seeing him through the phase of retirement and embarrassment. That's why he's such an asshole for the whole movie. Thomas Edison did that. We're seeing a fantastical film take on why the history of the film is so important to understand, and not only because Thomas Edison nearly destroyed it because he was a pathetic shit of a man with a god complex, but because film is a distinctly beautiful art form. And we are wise to appreciate how and why it came to be. This film romanticizes the very idea of filmmaking to the point it starts to border on fetishizing. Most of Méliès' work was basically filmed stage plays with a generous smattering of the best special effects the filmmaker could invent at the time. Hugo is that sentiment turned up to a billion. The train station is a massive set blocked like the most complex stage plays of all time. The special effects simply help us to maintain the illusion by never allowing us to believe we're anywhere but a fantastical reality wholly unlike our own, where something as everyday mundane as a train arriving at a station could fill an audience with wonder, where a person hanging from a clock can make an audience gasp with excitement, where the crashing of a train gives us a spectacle deserving of our story, where the people leaving that train station are a story we tell in our minds, wondering where they're going, who they are, where a simple story told against an epic backdrop is where cinema has always seemed most comfortable coming from. But what about the story, you say? Mikey, you didn't focus on the plot of this movie at all. You know what? You're right. But this movie is such a visual home run. Who gives a shit? And that does it for this episode of Movies with Mikey. Hope you enjoyed that trip down art cinema's memory lane. This was not a movie that was voted upon, but there's still time to vote on the next proper episode of MWM. Boop, boop, boop. There's the 3 movies we've been voting on, but be sure to leave your vote in the comments. I'll say this has been a close race up to now, so I'm excited to see where you guys end up. As always, please help me grow this channel by liking, sharing the videos, and subscribing to Chainsaw Suit Original. See y'all on the flip.